Thank you so much, Etna, for that fantastic panel. Really interesting. I love this idea of the charter of action, how to achieve balance. And in that, I'd love for you to take Gutanjali's advice. Tonight, when you get back, you might want to share something from this summit. And if you do, you can use the hashtag #SyncSummit. You don't have to do it on your phone. So we've just heard about the science of digital well-being, and we're now going to delve into the subject of digital literacy. I've got two very powerful leaders with me here on stage on the subject, Soledad Magnone and Susan Reynolds. First of all, we're going to look at the digital world that we're living in right now. Consider it as we would other forms of risky behavior, and why we need to get to grips with digital literacy right now. So, to help us do that, please welcome to the stage founder and CEO, Skills Camp and Safe Social, Bailey Parnell.
Hello, everyone. I am Bailey Parnell, and I'm very proud to be joining you here from Toronto, Canada. Today, we are talking digital literacy, but first I want to talk to you about driving. Yes, like driving a car. In most countries around the world, if you want to drive a car, you first have to reach a certain age where we think that you are ready to handle this responsibility. You then have to study the rules and the dangers of the road, and you may even have to write a test proving that you know those rules and dangers of the road. You might even have to do a practical, experiential test to prove that you know how to do this safely for yourself and others, because, of course, this is a shared road. You get your license, a pass to exercise this privilege, but only so long as you follow those rules, because if you don't, and especially if you put others in danger, that privilege is revoked. Why do we do this? We do this because we know that driving is a risky behavior. A risky behavior. Now, a risky behavior in psychology is simply something where when you participate, you expose yourself to potential harm. And we know for sure that when you drive, you expose yourself to potential harm. That could be as simple and light as stress and frustration, or that could be as serious as losing or taking a life. Now, I believe that social media and digital media use is also a risky behavior, because we know for sure now that you expose yourself to potential harm when participating in these spaces. Sometimes that is as light and simple as stress and frustration, and sometimes that is as serious as having someone take their life because of it, or cyberbullying, or revenge porn, or all of these things that we're talking about here. It is a risky behavior, and yet here's the wild thing. In the world, a high estimate, we would say that there are 2 billion drivers on the planet. Compare that with the 4.6 billion people that use social media. The consequences here are potentially farther reaching and longer lasting than anything to do with driving, but there is no knowledge test. There is no practical experiential test. There is no license to use this privilege, and there are very little consequences if you do go make it unsafe for people. It's kind of like we said, yeah, we don't really care how old you are, but take a drive. See you on the other side if you make it out. Now, that's not how I approach risky behaviors. What I think we need with this risky behavior, like most in my life, I think we need a harm reduction approach. I think that if telling people to get off social media is not going to work, then the next natural question is, how do you practice safe social? And that's where my model was born out of, the 5 steps towards safe social. Step 1 is building awareness and understanding. It is making sure that we are speaking the same language, and is that not literacy? Literacy is to know, to have skill and competence in a certain area. And literacy is the battle to ignorance. And I believe that if people know better, I think most people will do better. Skip forward to step 5. Step 5 is to hold the responsible parties accountable. That means everyone involved. That means governments, the social media companies themselves. That means parents, and that means us here in this room. We can start on this panel. We can start at this summit together, because we are not competitors here. If your nonprofit, if your business in this space does well, it does not mean that mine does not do well. It means that more people are well. Now, you came to a panel on digital literacy, but it's a little bit of a trick, because, of course, Digital literacy is not the goal here. The goal is digital well-being. That's why we've all showed up to this summit. It's digital well-being. But literacy, to know, to have skill and competence in this area is to move us towards digital well-being. And here's the funny thing. In this room, physically and virtually, most of us actually already know. We came to a conference on digital well-being, which presupposes that we know you can be unwell online. We already know. And so I want to move us from knowing and into doing. What can we do better? And that's really what I'm excited to talk about here today. And so let's get to it. Let's move us towards this panel with two of my brilliant colleagues, and let's talk what we can start doing better. My name is Bailey Parnell. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Bailey, for that. So we also have, as I mentioned, two fantastic other leaders. We have the director of the Jaaklac initiative, which operates across Latin America, Soledad Magnone. And we also have the co-founder and board chair of LookUp.live, Susan Reynolds, who, amazingly enough, is from my hometown in Piedmont, California. Crazy. So, Susan, you have worked with some incredible young people. I'd love you to tell us some examples of the digital literacy projects that you've seen them come up with, some of the things you've come across that promote or create digital well-being.
Oh, thank you, Edie. I have this amazing job. I get to work with Gen Z. So I'm working with the Isabellas and the Gitangelis out there. So that's really my vantage point that I come from. You're going to hear from a lot of adults, and there's phenomenal programs out there that are working. Jim Starr just talked about Common Sense Media. But the one thing that I realized is we weren't turning to Gen Z and saying, what are your pain points? What are your experiences? And even more importantly, what are your solutions, which you've heard? So that's what we do, and hold competitions for students to come together that everybody here can do in your own communities. And they come together and they tell us, they say, we need privacy laws that include our vantage point. We need to know. Tell us, we want to tell you what kind of social media we want. We don't want it to be addictive. We don't want to be controlled by the algorithms. And then we have a Youth for Youth Summit, and think of it, this conference right here was all youth coming up and speaking on these very issues. They know these things, they have these ideas. And so the literacy that they have from the adults, from the parents, from the schools, they then can turn around and do peer-to-peer and use storytelling. So they know how to use social media, they know the promise and peril of it, but what they also do is they tell stories to each other. And if they don't listen to their parents or if they don't listen to their teachers, they really do listen to their peers.
It's fantastic. Soledad, tell us about some of the examples of digital literacy programs that you have seen within your Latinx community.
Great. So with Jaaklac, we're mainly concerned with kind of balancing the digital divide. So far, strategies have been focused on creating access, deploying computers, cell phones, creating all the digital ecosystem that entails this digital era that we're living, but that was not parallel with strategies on digital education. So digital education so far has been uneven within these last 20 years of progressing into the internet permeating into different dimensions of our lives. And it's been based mostly on using digital technologies and not so much on understanding how these work and critically engaging with these technologies. With Jaaklac, we're trying to bring the understanding of how digital technologies work outside the science, technology, engineering, and math disciplines that generally portray technology as neutral, understand how these technologies affect us politically, economically, socially, psychologically, and our environment as well, in order not only to understand and have the values and the skills, but also to actively participate as change makers, as tech developers, as active participants in the development of the digital policies that we need and we want. And those we co-create with youth, with children, with educators, with activists, academics, and technologies, in order to then advocate for these to be included, formally included in schools and also for adult education as well, because it's not only putting the onus on the younger generations as where we're failing as developers, as policymakers, as researchers as well to the younger generations.
So a real connection in terms of getting the co-creation coming from the people who are affected the most. Fascinating. Tell me, Bailey, you mentioned your 5-step plan. You skipped from 1 to 5, but tell me, what kind of digital literacy examples would you point to that really work?
Well, if you continue on the definition of literacy as to know, to have knowledge and competence in a certain area, then really we all work in digital literacy here because we're all spreading some kind of knowledge here today and tomorrow. I'd say one of the things that always gets folks, especially young people, we do a lot of literacy knowing work around social media addiction. And what does this look like? And we actually, when I built this assessment, I built it through the lens of how we present signs of addiction to other risky behaviors, and through the lens of social media. And so some of the knowledge work we would do is through after going through the assessment, you simultaneously learn some of the signs of addiction. So for example, have you ever blacked out on social media and not remember what you did for the last hour? To what degree does this happen to you? If this happens a lot, there might be an issue. Does this happen in tandem with, have you ever lied or manipulated a situation to go use social media? For example, you told your friends you're going to the bathroom, but you actually just wanted to check something. Have you ever put yourself in physical danger? Like maybe you were trying to cross a road and someone honked at you because you were using social media. To what degree does this happen? So we do a lot of literacy there just because, without the requisite knowledge, this seems to be happening more and more often. An addiction, but not necessarily calling it an addiction because it's so ubiquitous. But if you ask me, by every measure right now, there is mass addiction to social media.
Can we just ask a few of those questions to the people in the audience? Just repeat some of those questions.
Can, definitely. I'm an educator by training, so I would love to do crowd work. Well, let's see. I don't know if people are going to self-admit to these ones, so there's going to be a public bias. So how many of you have not remembered what you've been doing on social media after you got off? If I asked you the kinds of posts, you wouldn't be able to answer it.
Okay, a few hands there, coming up slowly. Yep.
Now this assessment would say, how often does that happen to you? How many of you have, another one, thought about what you're going to post or how you're going to respond to something while you're in another situation? You're off social media, but you're thinking about what you're going to do on social media.
Okay, a few more hands coming up. Yep.
To what degree does this happen to you? So it would be similar if we were talking with, let's say, and actually we did, if you were talking with an alcoholic, you would actually see very similar tendencies. I think about it when I'm not doing it. It has maybe harmed my relationships. It has maybe put me in dangerous physical situations before. I have maybe blacked out doing it. And to what degree does this happen?
Interesting.
Getting me all riled up.
Susan, let me bring you in here because I want to hear more about some of the projects that the youth that you've worked with have come up with. You also mentioned some of the laws that they want to see from regulators. Tell us more.
So it's really interesting. If you go to technicallypolitics.org, you will find two dynamic college students who are collecting stories from their peers, but in this, asking about their experiences on social media with the express focus of bringing it to legislators. So I live in California, and I'm very excited that there is a new bill coming up, the Age-Appropriate Design Code, and the California legislatures are actually asking for the youth advocates to come and present. And really, it's very powerful when they do this. So that's one of the ways, and they're asking for something very simple, turning to the tech companies and saying, can you prioritize well-being over profits? So we know this is a really difficult thing, but the thing that's really exciting is since Frances Haugen spoke and with the Facebook files, there is legislation coming up and it's possible. We have this feeling that it's possible. Part of it is that the UK has passed a design code, and so there's a folding over. So having a global summit like this, and then bringing global youth to the conversations, that we can start to fold on each other's laws. So that's really exciting. But more and more and more organizations that I work with, advocacy organizations, they're asking for the youth. They want a youth council. They want youth advisors. So really, we haven't seen the power of Gen Z yet, and then the generation below, but I'm really optimistic about it.
Sounds like you could provide them with some of these youth advisors.
I absolutely could.
So, Soledad, what about you? Lawmakers need to be digitally literate as well. What regulation or laws that the youth that you know work with, what do they want to see?
Definitely including critical digital education, for example, in curriculum, but also having spaces for informal education, programs that promote that sustain that economically, and policies that are also informed by research, and research not only created in Europe or North America. For example, the report that was presented by Zinc, I think it's really important to have what's the standpoint of Saudi Arabia on this problem. We're all engaging in this conversation, and also need to understand and make sense of what is the truth about well-being. What is well-being understood in different cultures and different generations as well. So policy is also informed by research created in different regions, different cultures, and making spaces for meaningful participation. And in relation to youth, as Susan was saying, spaces for them to have their own places to lead, but they think they are the future. We need to engage them more. They are, in many regions, they're not voting or associating with political parties or in unions, as in with other generations, but they're gravitating into digital spaces to advocate for their cultural rights, to their environment, gender rights also. So we need to find ways to also attract them and into our democratic institutions or into this global discussion as well. And that those spaces need to be intergenerational. To also bring together the knowledge from the past and think collectively and make sense of what's the future that we want.
It's interesting that the young people you work with are asking for this for legislation to encourage the literacy, even though they're the digital natives. Absolutely fascinating. Tell us, Bailey, about from your perspective about how legislators can help promote digital literacy. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that Soledad said something really important there, which is that well-being is defined differently around the world. And how we regulate other risky behaviors and how we regulate other communications media is usually done on the national level. And so this too should be done, I think, on a national level. And what that's going to require, for example, like in Canada, certainly other countries around the world, there are certain things that you're not allowed to advertise on kids' television. Okay, this is not surprising. You're not allowed to advertise cigarettes, for example. And this is regulated by the government and enforced and put into action by the broadcasters. The broadcasters are required to adhere to this. So we have risky behaviors paired with communications media. Those same advertisers went over to Facebook, Instagram, and targeted young 14-year-olds with pharmaceuticals and vaping. They did it, and it worked, and we had a vaping crisis in the US. And so this is politics, and if you ask me, what they need is a little bit more courage to go after some of the businesses. I hate saying it that way. To work together with some of these businesses to regulate in a national way. And I really think UK has led the charge on this, because what they've done is, it seems so simple, but it's actually such a difference in the internet world, which is they're saying, we are regulating based on where the service is being delivered, not where it's coming from. It's dramatically different in internet regulation. They're saying, Facebook, Google, you name it, we don't really care where you're based. Say it's in Dublin, it's actually in California. But if you are servicing people here in Saudi, if you are servicing people here in the UK or Canada, you figure it out. These are the rules. You figured it out in every other risky behavior, and we require distributors of other risky behaviors to educate about their warnings, like putting warnings on a smoke pack. Why is there no knowledge or practical test before you get into this risky behavior that is upwards of, what, 8 hours a day.
So do you think there should be a test before you hand a child a phone?
Yeah, there's got to be some tests, but like every risky behavior, it's a multi-pronged approach that's going to be required. So say, like I gave the example of driving there, but that is a good example of one where the governments came together, parents teach about driving, educators, there's literally whole driving schools, and then we have this license, and then we have rules, and what we're ultimately trying to do is keep the society safe and well. So what I wanted to, get into today or tomorrow, or with fellow delegates and speakers is just this, actually. Should there be a license? What does that license look like? Why are we not having this conversation and putting out, or together at least, having this conversation together? That's the truth, because we were just talking about how it is happening in different parts of the world, but how we've just not connected yet. So this is really important.
Or should there be a license to develop the technology also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
With
and
so
then
much
is that
being
national
put
too? Maybe that's
responsibility
national too.
on us.
Because maybe Canada would say, we think this age is good. And maybe Italy would say, we think this age is good.
Right. What do you think, Susan?
Well, I think, the puzzle is you have the law, you have the license, but then how do you enforce it? And so that's where the buy-in comes in from those users or those that have the license, so the youth themselves.
Something interesting would be also in Canada, if you are distributing alcohol, which would be a risky behavior, it's actually on the bars distributing the alcohol to enforce the laws that are in place. And they get in trouble if someone gets drunk and goes and drives home and kills someone.
Right.
So if we maybe use this as at least a model to start the conversation, because maybe it is partially on the companies. And I think Isabel from earlier today would be one of those people, kind of like working in this space of what can these companies do. What I'm interested in is tomorrow's conversation on tech, or later today or tomorrow, about tech as a human right.
Yeah, later. And
actually, I think that would be the counterbalance.
That's a question I wanted to ask you, because are we missing a trick? Because we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's been around for many years. Could we use that to promote digital literacy, digital well-being?
Yeah, so the discussion particularly, there was a report in 2015 showcasing that 1 in 3 internet users online globally were under 18 years old, and how so far discussions on the internet governance were not engaging into this, and how we can develop digital spaces that balance protecting children but also enabling their participation, and developing those spaces according to their needs and wants.
Right.
And it's quite comprehensive, and it's one of the most widely ratified treaties, and it's really helpful to assess in which areas we're failing and how we can push forward.
Interesting. So, Susan, tell me, what's one thing that everyone here in person and also those watching online can do right now to increase their digital literacy, their digital well-being?
So we've done the LookUp challenge, and part of it was to choose a time and a space that you're not going to use your phone. So it's the 3 S's. Can you sleep without your phone or device? Can you study or work without your phone or device? And can you socialize without your phone or device? So that's not a complete social media or phone detox, but it's choosing when you use it. And students who have done this challenge in week-long challenges, the things they say, and one little boy said, my mom didn't have to wake me up in the morning because I didn't stay up all night playing video games on my phone. So it works.
Wow. All right, Soledad, from your perspective, what's one thing that people can go out right now to increase their digital well-being or their digital literacy?
Let's talk more about these issues. The pandemic accelerated the discussion on well-being, and it's important to talk. It's important to think collectively what we want and to engage with the different actors. And the different actors are international. So this is a conversation that I want to encourage everyone to be actively participating in and connecting with big tech or technology, big tech companies, or trying to think which technological development you would like to develop or for which policy you would like to advocate, do workshops, do campaign, think creatively, use these kind of spaces, connect with key stakeholders. ITHRA is opening the door, for example, and bringing people together from different parts of the world. Use this platform to actively own the changes that you want.
Yeah. Bailey, what about you? What's one thing the audience can walk out and do right now?
Well, I think you can practice safe social, but step 4 in practicing safe social is modeling good behavior or leading by example. And sometimes we think just about, am I making my social media space safe for me or something that actually serves me when I leave it? But I also mean, what are you putting online? And are you contributing to this being a safe and healthy space for others? And not just what you are actually saying on the platforms, but also how do you model your relationship with, say, mobile technology? Because whether you like it or not, this is also a learned behavior. So if you have kids, they don't know if you're on email, for example. Like you might be on email doing something to help them, but they don't know. So what they learn is the behavior of pulling this out at the dinner table. So modeling good behavior, leading by example, is thinking about that as well. And then when this policy does come out, go vote on it, tell people about it, and use your platform for this good as well. So practice safe social.
Fantastic. Well, that is fantastic advice, because we are going to go practice safe social and model good behavior and use one of the S's right now, because we're breaking for a coffee. And for anyone who's here in person, we're meeting in the no tech zone. Why is it called that? Well, we're here because we're all working on digital well-being. So let's be there IRL. And if you haven't done Bailey's 5 steps, that stands for in real life. I'm sure everyone here knew that. When we come back, we're going to be looking at the psychology of technology and building on Bailey's point about risky behavior. How engaging with technology can lead to behavior that's hard to get out of. Digital addiction, problematic social media use. We've got some renowned experts on behavioral science for you, with the renowned Bureau Chief of Euronews Dubai, Jane Witherspoon. So we'll see you back here at 12 o'clock sharp.
Thank you.